For our listeners who may not be familiar with Rudolf Steiner, the man, and what he did here and what he taught, could you give us, just a basic foundation of who Rudolf Steiner was, the man, and how did he contribute in the physical 3D world? How did he contribute to humanity while he was here in that lifetime?
Okay. You want me to answer one of those boring questions?
I want our listeners to have the foundation of where we go further in the conversation and to know who Rudolf Steiner, the physical man, the entity was while he lived here.
I'm being funny.
I love it.
When Steiner was a boy, he saw a woman. His dad worked in the railway station. And he saw a woman, and he didn't know what the connection was with this woman, but she was pretty ethereal, and she didn't say anything. And he was, probably about 7 years old, and he later heard that at the moment he saw that woman, his aunt had committed suicide, taken her life, and he would have had no way of knowing that. And he recognized, as a 7-year-old, say nothing to anyone. But he also recognized, okay, there's something that happens for me that doesn't happen for other people as far as I'm aware yet. That was the first and most significant event in his life where he recognized, I have the capacity to see what's here in front of me, but I also have the capacity to see what's not in front of me, or what's in front of me in a different way. And so that sparked in him this interest to study mathematics. And he studied mathematics and the biological sciences to the extent where he could think through from what I would say is geometry to sacred geometry, to the capacity to build an incredible building that's still listed among architects as one of the most amazing feats of the 20th century, the Gurdjieff. And then after it burned down, building a second one. So he was able to create, through mathematical thinking, a connection to the spiritual world, and then able to share that connection. So the first thing he did that was of significance is after World War I, he tried to provide the world with what he called a threefold social order that had what the French resistance had. It had liberty, fraternity, equality. But it had more than that in all of these three different domains of the human being. But the world had a different aim in mind. They wanted to carve up the different nations and exploit all the natural resources in each of them. America at the head of that, but certainly the G5 or G7, they had the picture of how to gerrymander those pieces. And so he was left with this image of how humanity could really develop with no real way of figuring out how to do it. Then there were workers around Germany who needed to figure out what to do and how to orient themselves to the world. So he started talking to these workers, and one of them owned a cigarette factory. And the guy said, I want you to help educate my workers' kids, because this is the way that we're going to change humanity. These adults who are in politics, they've already got their picture of the way the world is made. But kids are like gods. They're open, they're beautiful, they're ready. And these kids that are disadvantaged, that are from the lower economic sector, why not start with them? And he said, absolutely. And he also made it co-ed, which was completely unheard of in that time. And he also said to the German government, you will give me no restrictions. And they said, we'll give you all kinds of restrictions because we're the German government. But what he negotiated is, he said, I get to choose all my own teachers. And he didn't choose any teachers who had any kind of training whatsoever, except kind of like his. They had training in one area of thought that they had clearly distinguished a kind of openness for. And he invited them in, and he started this school. It was called Waldorf, because the name of the factory was the Waldorf factory. And after he created that, he realized that nutrition is a huge piece of what's necessary. And so all of the things that happened that he created, none of them were something that he said, hey, I've got this great idea, God, I want to put this thing on the map. It was people coming to him, banging on his door relentlessly and saying, they're starting to spray our crops with stuff that's making us all sick. This is horrifying stuff. What are we going to do? He said, this is what you do. You make a connection with the cosmos as well as the earth, and this is called biodynamics. And organics was a lower level spin-off of that. But the notion of biodynamics is consonant with something like, if you read the book Anastasia, which is also ironically a channeled book. Anastasia was this book written by this very well-to-do businessman in Russia who ended up making love to this woman in the middle of the boreal forest up in the middle of nowhere in Siberia, where she wore almost nothing and just lived in the wild. And he just thought, man, I've struck gold. And then he realized, oh my God, she's a teacher and I'm fucked. And he completely became her student, and he wrote another 8 books. But one of the things she talked about was that her capacity to work telepathically with individuals who have little home gardens. And he said, Steiner, as well as this teacher, Anastasia, who really comes out of a Tibetan and I think an Atlantean lineage, that the task is to grow our own food with love, or to have it grown by people who love us. And it's the energy in the food, and maybe it's the supplements. It doesn't matter what we're taking, but to know those human beings, to love them, and to have them love us, to have them love the alchemical process of moving from seed to table, but really moving from love to love, from their love to our love. And then we create, through destruction of these substances, consciousness. And this is what Steiner was all about. And he said the cosmos plays an active part in this. So biodynamics would be the second thing that I would say is a huge piece of what he brought. The third piece is there were doctors who were just banging down his door, trying to figure out, how do we heal? How do we work with human beings? And he brought anthroposophical medicine. Those are the 3 that I would say are the deepest. He was also just an incredible artist in so many different mediums. And he said that the human being, to be an artist, and that's why Waldorf schools have so much art in them, not so much to become an artist, but to think artistically, to feel artistically, to move in the world artistically, to have that kind of nobility. Those are the pieces that he brought to us. And the Waldorf School, he understood that relationship is everything. And so in the primary years, you have the same teacher who teaches all of the main subjects from 1st to 8th grade. So you get to know the parents, you get to know the children in an incredibly deep way. And there's obviously a karmic connection there. And that the teacher is forced to be one step ahead of the students at every moment, because it's always a new curriculum for her. My wife's the 5th grade teacher right now, and my son is in that class. Mm-hmm. And so it's, we've been 30 years just in this movement, and the beauty of that work never ceases to amaze me. So that's what I would say about, who he was and what did he bring. He gave over 6,000 lectures and wrote over 50 books. You couldn't digest his work in a lifetime. It's the same level of density as the raw material, probably worse, because at least raw was not being translated into English from German. And so unless you speak German, and even if you do, you're listening to German spoken through him. Steiner was a conscious channel. I mean, he was spoken through by Michael. He didn't come through with this stuff on his own. He was awake enough to know what the good dope was and to share that. And when he was off, he said, course correct.
Yeah.
So to give you a little picture of what he brought.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And again, it's like we could talk all day about the things that he's done and said. And I similarly had a familiarity with him through Waldorf, through our upbringing, which was mainstream. Most towns have a Waldorf school, and you hear like, oh, it's a Steiner school, and that's what you hear about. And you're like, oh, Rudolf Steiner school. But I had no depth as it pertained to how much he was involved in. And as we stepped into the health and wellness space, was familiar or began getting familiar with biodynamics, and I was like, oh my God, the Rudolf Steiner guy's behind this too. This is nuts. And then we get into meeting Paul Chek, and we're learning about Lucifer and Ahriman and how much of this just wildly profound articulation of these energies in the world, and how spot on it is with some of the things that have now manifested in the current reality that we live is just nuts. And so much of it's rooted in his genius.
Thank you so much for listening.
If you enjoyed that, check out right over here for some more fun clips.
Oh, and you're going to want to subscribe.
Bye.